Welcome to the Frith Guild Podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm co-host Scott.
And I'm Dan.
And today we will be going over Demon Card Enforcer, the book by John Stovall that was recently released, not to be confused with his second book that he's already released on November 26th. But we figure we go over this rather than start into Warlord Arcanus. And with that, we'll get into it.
So Demon Card Enforcer is a lit RPG, and it's set in a realm where the gods gift out magical decks every 10 years. So think Magic the Gathering, think Yu-Gi-Oh!, think Pokemon, and the people who receive these decks can play the cards in the real world. Creatures come to life, and they essentially become superheroes of a sort. So we follow the path of some crime lords in the city as various decks are granted to different players throughout the world.
So, in general, what was your opinion of the book, Scott?
It was a good fantasy portion. I really like the realm itself. It's got a lot of really unique card decks, card typings. It's not your typical like fire, water. It's more based on these different gods, which lends itself to some really creative decks. I will say, if you are into RPGs, it does get a little rule-y at times as you're trying to figure out the rules of the deck. So there were some parts that are hard to follow, but once you kind of get a feel for how the cards get played out and some of their abilities and how they interact, it does lend itself to some really cool opportunities. Just as you would expect, the main character Wolf is able to kind of swap cards in his deck and create different builds that he plays with throughout the novel.
Now, I've recently been looking at a few lit RPG stories. Matter of fact, there was one as we're recording this that was released today. And both the new one that I heard about and the Honor Raise All the Skills has cards. But in those stories, the cards have abilities, but they're abilities that's put on the person. Kind of like, you get a plus 10% to your swordsmanship or even though they're cards, they read more like a regular role-playing game. One of the things that I thought was unique about this particular book was that it actually felt like Yu-Gi-Oh! or Digimon or one of those where he's whipping out monsters and throwing them at the enemy. And most of the modification cards are helping the monsters out there. And I've got to get I got 20 more seconds before I can put a third monster on the field. And it although I've seen some card-based lit RPGs before, I've never seen one that quite captured that whole Yu-Gi-Oh! Digimon feel from back in the day when those were really big.
I have to admit that's one of my favorite parts of it, and the concept of you can't the card can't attack the other deck bearer if they have another creature on the field. That's one of those I love that. It definitely reminded me of Yu-Gi-Oh! In that sense, because I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic the Gathering, those similar card games, you can't attack the other person's life points or whatever you want to call them. Pick insert. But definitely been.
I agree. The rule was that monsters can only attack other monsters until the monsters are gone. So as you're seeing your monsters get whittled down, you know that as soon as your last one disappears, you're about to get mobbed by a pile of monsters. So there's definitely still a personal stake in it. It's not just two guys sitting out there saying I play. Man, it's been so many years I can't even remember the names of them.
Blue-eyed white dragons.
Yeah.
Same one right there.
Yeah. The wizard with the funky hat that goes like this. And
Dark magician.
Yeah.
The other thing I really liked, like you said, there's the aspect of attacking the deck bearers, but the deck bearers are in the fight too. So as these monsters are running around, you also have people with legitimate guns shooting legitimate bullets that do legitimate damage at each other. So there's a big other element to it, just in terms of the real world aspect as it plays out with the deck cards that are out.
Did you see Shabby Stovall's comic when right before the first book came out, where she actually had a comic book where some Yu-Gi-Oh! Was throwing out cards and a guy whips out a magnum and shoots him?
Yeah.
That comic was very definitely inspired by John's stories.
Absolutely. And I love his, 'cause he even promotes this as John Wick meets Magic, correct? I've had so many
Magic the
different,
Gathering.
yeah. He's definitely like that John Wick kind of person, like lost his dog, get,
But not killed by the bad guys.
He
did lose his
by
dog.
the bad guy, but like I feel like anytime Cerebu gets killed in the game or whatever, I feel like there's a little bit of John Wick flipping out, switch flipping out on him. So
the companion cards was something that was due to this world. So normally you can only throw out a monster every 30 seconds, but with the new decks, you also get this companion card. So, and Cerebu, the three-headed boxer that Wolf owns, it's just a perfect image. And it's not just a dog; it's a boxer, and it's slobbery, and there's one scene. Oh yeah, and doesn't seem to mind getting shot. And it comes, and it doesn't speak English, but it understands it. So he's like, "Are you actually okay with this puppy?" And he's like, "Yep, we're fine." But still, it reminds me more of the movie Up. Remember Doug?
Hi.
Doug.
Squirrel.
Doug. Even though he could talk, Doug was still very much a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And Cerebu's intelligent and he remembers previous fights and all this other stuff, but he is still a dog, a three-headed dog, that can breathe fire, but he's still very much a dog.
And there's just some great scenes of the heads just kind of like lolling onto each other, licking each other, fighting for food. So a lot of just dog aspects that carry over into it and just make Cerebu so lovable.
And so we've got a mob setting. We've got a mob enforcer who has previously taken down other deck bearers before getting a deck, as he did, at the very beginning of this book. And then we've got Shell, which is the new wild card in the story. The thing that's driving the story forward is Shell.
I think one of the great ways to define Shell is that everybody else is getting these like demon decks, infernal decks, imp decks, and she is divine.
Yeah. Healers and angels, wings, and the whole deal. And mortal. She's got divine and mortal, so she's also pulling out like cops and EMTs.
I thought that was absolutely awesome. Instead of just here's a healing potion or healing card, like I like the way he incorporates the healing aspect, and it doesn't just go for the creatures that they're on the field; it goes for him too.
Mm-hmm. So this is probably going to be a fairly short video because I can't think of too much else to say about it.
I will say one of the not necessarily like book like inside the plot and everything. I will say that I absolutely love the chapter headings for each chapter. I loved having the snippet of the rules posted on each chapter. I did notice that after a certain point, it didn't go chronologically anymore or numerically anymore. But it had chapter 1 is rule 1, chapter 2 is rule 2. Right. I love that.
Yeah. Luckily, we didn't need 106 chapters to get to rule 106.
Right. But it most of the time it was either fitting because the rule was announced during that chapter, or I don't know. I really enjoyed that structure of the way he did that in the book.
It felt like a steady way to incorporate like little bits of the game throughout it.
Did either of you guys listen to the audio recording for that?
No.
I got the audio recording, and it's the sound booth guys. The same guy who did the voice for Adair Finch was the guy who did the voice for Wolf. And at the every time they would have like a rule for the beginning of the chapters, they just crank up the reverb. They'd be like, "And here's the voice from on high about the rules," with that whole tone, which was a little bad for my speakers because I had them up a little bit, and that was just a little bit louder. But one of the things, as a general rule, that I find is I don't like lit RPG audiobooks. because when you're reading a book, you can just skim over the character sheet or skim over, whatever it is that, keeps getting thrown up on this page or the screen if you're having an ebook. With an audiobook, you've got to sit there and listen to them go over the rules and go over the character sheets. And I love the fact that although it was very technical, although he was taking all the abilities and saying, I can put this card together and I can with this card and I can do this way. They weren't sitting there just repeating a lot of information that didn't matter. They weren't throwing up character sheets and you were sitting there going, oh, I've got to listen to this again.
Agreed. I've listened to some lit RPGs where it's like, these are my stats. I'm going to upgrade swordsmanship. These are my stats with the upgraded swordsmanship, and you're just sitting there for like 30 seconds, like, okay, come on, like back to the novel.
Yeah.
Well, because they have to read the whole character sheet all over again.
And although, there was still that there. This is still a lit RPG, but I like the fact that it was less bad, for lack of a better way to put it.
It felt like we only read things once. Like when it gave the card description, you read the, Infernal Hellhound, this is what its description was. And if you came across that again, we didn't necessarily reread through the full sheet. You have a general idea of what this character can do.
I agree.
I have to admit that reading this one in comparison to like listening to the omnibus for the
Nexus.
Yes, sorry. I almost put it behind my shoulder. For the Nexus games, definitely appreciate being able to read it and not listen to it. And I actually just listened to a different lit RPG book, and I just finished it like 2 days ago. And it was one of those just like, oh my freaking gosh, stop reading the character sheets, please.
Now, did either of you guys get to see this? And before it was published, it came out on Royal Road. Did you see any of that?
I'm one of those people that don't want to see anything before it's released. Like everything that Shammy produces on Patreon, as far as like Labyrinth Arcanist or any of her other books that she posts chapter by chapters on, I literally ignore it because I like to read it all at once rather than a little bit at a time.
I try and stick with Rocky Road. That's kind of my go-to.
The ice cream?
Dan, do you got any at home?
Just clarify, because there's a lot of stuff out there I don't know about.
the ice cream.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the one of the things they did on Royal Road is, in addition to having the actual rules, right above that, they actually had a card with a picture on it. And I was actually a little disappointed that when the published book came out, that it didn't actually have the physical cards at the beginning of each chapter with the photos on them.
That would be very cool, because there's some really interesting characters that I would love to see the pictures for.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Now, have either of you guys been on John's Discord?
No.
Wait, well, on Shammy's channel how busy the fan-made Eldrin has been.
Mm-hmm.
There are some really serious deck builders on the card suggestion channel on John's Discord. Like every single day they're coming up with a dozen cards.
Jeez.
And somehow they've got a really good grasp of how things fit together. And so you don't end up with a whole bunch of wild stuff that's incredibly underpowered or incredibly overpowered, or all of it meets the game mechanics. And John has a real good understanding of it, and he's pop it in with suggestions, tweak this and do that, and I could easily with all the stuff that's coming off of that channel, seeing actual physical decks full of cards being produced for this game.
Shoot, I'd totally get on with that. I wonder if he's doing that as a teaser or maybe a Kickstarter or something of that sort, that maybe that's what he's doing as far as getting all of the graphics, the artwork and that stuff for the cards first. I know you said he released quite a lot already, correct?
You're talking about the cards?
The official artwork for the cards.
Well, most of that stuff was just the AI stuff. Okay. Let's slap in a command, and it wasn't professional artists or anything along those lines, like the bestiary or anything. So that may have been why he didn't include it in the published book.
Okay. I mean, I imagine if he gets enough traction with it though, and this is such a great read. I loved it from start to finish. I loved it. I imagine if he gets enough traction, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that would love to see actual decks come out, and like you're saying, with people doing a fan-made decks that aren't just randomly making things up and are actually abiding by his rules, by his logic, game logic, that this would be a pretty fun, this would be an amazingly fun game to play. So John, think about it. Let us know.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, nudge.
We're not saying, but
Well, I mean, like in the book, I mean, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but in the actual books, John's part of a mob group. So infernal decks are very, very common. And there's a rival gang, and they have a lot of corrupted cards. And then, of course, Shell and her divine cards. But you don't really have a lot of the other types. Most of it's, mortal, divine, a little undead, but generally out of the 10, 15 different types of cards, they generally stay within a fairly small circle,
right,
which is fine because this is the first book of the series. And I mean, when we started with Nightmare Arcanist, we had 6 Eldrin, and then after we had these guys, the core group, then it expanded out from there. I could definitely tell on the fan base stuff that they've got their favorites. So, there's I have no clue what a Rattletail is, but there's somebody who loves Rattletails and that the house for the Rattletail and the Rattletail modifier. So if we went by just the fan channel, it would be a very, very lopsided selection of cards.
Well, I imagine as we get more and more books from him, we'll probably see more and more variety of the cards and get a better clue as to how the other ones work with. And I know, again, it in the top of the chapters, it explains exactly what's strong against what's weak against what, or at least for a few of the main groups. But I imagine we'll get more and more of that. And this seems like it's going to be a really fun adventure to be on. And unfortunately, when we're recording this, we can't read Demon Card Enforcer 2 yet. So I believe...
Yeah, none of us got our copies. And
keep checking the mail, and it keeps not being there.
I don't know why. I'm scratching my head here, so...
I just plain old didn't ask. I should have. I mean, he may have said yes.
Shoot, right? And I only know that November 26th because I actually messaged John this afternoon because I saw that he had November 20th as a release date. And I was kind of like, oh crap, we're going to have to do some working around here to release on time. But he said that the sound booth audio is going to be released on the 26th of November as well. So he figured that since it's just a few days, he'll just push back the release of the actual book itself so that it releases the same day as the audio book. So,
okay. Yeah. Up here on my calendar, I've got Beware of Chicken 4 is coming out on the 19th. And then Demon Card Enforcer 2 was on the 20th. And then on the 26th, there's a Dark Lord villain story, which book 3 is coming out. It's kind of funny because it's an isekai story. And at one point in the first book, he asks his little familiar, by the way, you said the gods are playing this game. Are there actually levels and experience points and all that kind of stuff? And the familiar looks at him, is like, no. I mean, the gods are playing a game, but for the mortals, it's just, life and death. And he said, oh, that's good. That'd be silly.
A little talk beyond the wall.
Little dig at the LNRPG guys, right?
All right, and so this episode also is going to be airing December 4th. That starts the for those that are not, I guess I'm a Grinch in comparison to some. I very much so am. Christmas starts after Tom is in my belly, and for those that are across the not United States, I'm referring to Thanksgiving. Once Thanksgiving is over, I officially start my Christmas here, I guess. So this is the start of, if you guys are looking for an interesting lit RPG or know anybody that is a book person that would love to get books for Christmas, because I know I do, I would definitely say Demon Card Enforcer is a great book to start with, along with, hey, might as well pick up the second one, because if they inhale the first one, they're going to want to read the second one, and you might as well just get both of them. One's a stocking stuffer, one's under the tree. It works perfectly.
If you give a mouse a cookie.
I've been surprised at how often they've had sales. I admit the reason that I got the audiobook was because it was on sale for like $4.99 or something.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. I was like, I generally don't like listening to lit RPG, but
Twist small.
One little trick I found out is if you go into Audible and you make a wish list, of books, it will notify you when something on your wish list goes on sale.
Ooh.
Very handy.
Yeah. So I very rarely buy stuff full price. Yeah, but I get a lot of my books from the library, so
that's my main source too.
Yep. Yeah, I can't get John's stuff at the library.
Yeah, definitely something to look forward to. And starting next week on December the 11th, we'll be starting into Warlord Arcanist, and we will be getting in chapters 1 through 5 with that. And I think outside of Coliseum Arcanist, I think Warlord Arcanist is my next favorite in the series. So I'm so excited to get into this one.
It has my favorite monologue in it, so I'm anxiously awaiting it.
I liked it too. I think my favorite was the end there with Grandmaster. How the whole series ended. But that's still way down the road in terms of the podcast.
Yep. When I know there's so many things that I constantly was thinking with Coliseum, because we're in Thronehold, that I had to remind myself when we were reading it that, like, oh no, this happens in Warlord Arcanist, not in Coliseum. Just because they're in Thronehold doesn't mean it's in Coliseum. So there's a lot of things I was like, oh, I'm so excited about, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's not for a while still. Dang it. But we are almost there.
Yeah, I wrote a piece of fan fiction, which I'm not going to share with anybody. It's not that good. But the whole thing revolved around some will-o-wisp arcanists. They function as the police force in Thronehold.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting there trying to rescue civilians from the stuff that the god creature arcanists are doing. So, you've got the world serpent and Volk, and then you've got, the various other god creatures all there fighting in Thronehold. And, all the things that are happening to the people, Volk's sitting up there, looking down on it. But I had the story about a low-powered, tier 1 arcanist who's in it, when all this stuff's going down and, buildings are falling over and all that kind of stuff.
Ooh. Maybe we can convince you at some point when we're getting closer to that to share with us.
If I could convince somebody of like Shamy's caliber to be a developmental editor and actually turn it into something readable, then yes, okay. Maybe. But as it is right now, no.
Shammy.
I think I've been treating on her enough already.
All right. Well, with that, we'll end today's episode. We're looking forward to getting into Warlord Arcanist again. You can get John's book on pretty much any platform in which you can get ebooks or order books or listen to books, other than kind of like the library book section, book audiobook thing. I know I can't get on Hoopla, so whenever it does, though, I'll be listening to it. All right. With that, though, we thank you.
And I would suggest that we include a link for his Discord, because as I said, if you like the book, particularly the card channel on his Discord would definitely be something that those people would definitely want to check out.
Absolutely. We'll get everything down in the description below. I'll probably be going over there for sure, because I really enjoyed it. So
yeah, it was great. So I'd love to see some of the fan decks.
Yep, highly recommend. Dan, Scott, do you guys have anything else you'd like to add today?
Go support the family. It's a family business at this point.
All right, thanks guys for watching. We'll catch you guys next week.
Bye.
Eric, Scott, and I want to thank everyone for listening today. We post a new episode every Wednesday morning at 11 Eastern, 10 Central, and 8 Pacific Standard Time. We are on all podcasting platforms and are also on YouTube as well for video. After the additional episode airs, we post chapter-by-chapter videos every day in a smaller, easier-to-digest format. We do want to give a special shout-out to the final member of our team, Dan Mackison, one of the admins for the Frith Chronicles wiki, link listed below, and doing his best to keep everything running smoothly behind the scenes. If you want to reach out to us, you could email us at frithguildpod@gmail.com or on Facebook or any other social media by searching for Frith Guild Podcast. Just to remind everybody, we have links to everything in the description below on both the podcast and YouTube.
Scott, would you mind starting us off with just a brief description and overview of Demon Card Enforcer by John Stovall?
Yeah, so Demon Card Enforcer is lit RPG to kick it off, and it's based in this world where every 10 years the gods gift out magical decks of cards. So think Magic the Gathering, think Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon.
Yep.
Man.
See, that's normal. I hate to say that. I really hate to say that. That's normal.
That part is normal. I've edited it enough for them.
All right, I'll kick that off again.